Welcome, Hotshots, to Flashlight by Firepower X. Here you can find the industrial strength tools you need to dominate your personal and professional wellness. As always, my name is Jess. I'm boss lady over here at Firepower X, former firefighter, and your host for today's webinar. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's guest, Zach Wiegert. He is the founder of The Art of Story and a parkour coach at Apex School of Movement in Denver. He's passionate about three things, or so I'm told: movement, coaching, and storytelling, all with the objective to help people close the gap between who they are now and the person they know they can be. And Zach is also a documentary filmmaker and photographer, and his first film just was released just a few weeks ago. So let's welcome Zach. Thanks for joining
Thank
us
you so
today.
much. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah. What was your film about? Let's start there.
Yeah, of course. So this is it's a documentary that I've been working on for it took about a year and a half, year and 7 months to complete. And it's actually about one of my students who I've been teaching at the parkour gym
Mhm.
for most of most of her life
Mhm.
since she started training when she was like 8 years old. Um, and yeah, she just has this really incredible story of like becoming a really passionate and high level parkour athlete. She took second place at the international women's speed competition. It's like the biggest parkour comp in the world last summer.
Mhm.
And she did all of that like before turning 17, and
Wow.
while also having both type 1 diabetes and Crohn's disease.
Wow.
So she's just had like this series of like really intense like medical challenges to contend with
Mhm.
um, as a young woman, and just has overcome them in this really profound way to just to keep going after what really matters to her.
Mhm.
So it was my first time making a documentary, and I was just like,
Uh-huh.
I feel like this would be like a good story. Probably won't be that hard.
Mhm.
Learning curve was probably 10 to 20 times more intense than I was expecting it to be. But oh man, it
Mhm.
was such a special thing to be able to complete that and share it.
Mhm. What was that feeling of sitting and watching your film be premiered or in its final stage? What was that feeling for
Yeah.
you?
Oh man, just like it's like in the digital age, it's like I can like share a trailer and like it can get like a couple thousand views, or like I like a couple thousand people will see something and I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. But to have like an in-person screening like that where you have, I mean, I had like I think it was like 75 or 80 people, like
Mhm.
real humans in the room who sat down to like watch this thing I made.
Mhm.
And like the lights went down and we pressed play, and it was just like I was like, wow, this is it. Like this is the feeling that I
Mhm.
want to keep pursuing for the rest of my life. Like it's really special.
Yeah. It's almost otherworldly. That's what I've found when you
Hmm.
finally hit the goal. It's like, "Oh my God, I'm
Yeah.
here. I
It's like,
did
wait,
it."
I climbed the mountain. It's like we did it. And now I can
Exactly.
move on.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
that's these are some really diverse interests you have of
sure.
storytelling and movement. And how do you bring all those together? What's kind of the common thread of these things for you?
Hmm. Yeah, well, let me kind of talk about those things individually first,
Sure.
and then see if we can kind of like find the thread that links them together.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as like movement, I started training parkour when I was, gosh, I think 11 years old or
Hmm.
something. And I came from like when I was a kid, like I did not like regular team sports. Like I was terrible at them. I did not have fun. And then like I just heard about this video of these like street ninjas that my friend was telling me about on the playground. I'm like, what the hell? Like, what is that? Like, I want to like, what is this? Like, what are you talking about? And I just looked it up and see these videos of these dudes like jumping between buildings and just doing all this cool shit. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, this I could get behind.
Hmm.
And it turned out that the gym I work at now was one of three parkour gyms like in the nation at the time. So I started training there. And really, it just like it became a huge part of my life and my lifestyle. And I mean, I've been training parkour and like been a part of that community for almost 15 years now.
Hmm.
Um, so that has just really driven my passion for movement, just in like seeing like how it benefits people.
Hmm.
And over time with that, I realized that I wanted to be able to teach it. So I went through like the coaching apprenticeship, and then since about 2018 now, coaching has been my main job, and I've
Mm-hmm.
just really fallen in love with that. Just being able to share like the joy of movement with people, because like parkour is just really damn fun. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
just jumping on walls and like running up them, and it's so sick.
Mm-hmm.
But it also has that deeper level of like really having an impact on people's lives. And I love getting to bring people into that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Let's
then as
pivot to
far as,
story.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, now story.
pivot
Tell
to
us
story.
about,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So alongside that, I really started developing this passion for like outdoor adventure. And that kind of came because I picked up a camera. So I was like I feel like taking pictures is like something I might like be interested in. I'd
Mm-hmm.
never really liked like being outdoors before, but as soon as I picked up a camera, I all of a sudden I had reason to go out and start doing stuff. So I really like fell in love with movement, like in the mountains, like climbing, backpacking, mountaineering, backcountry skiing, all that,
Mm-hmm.
as I was learning how to tell those stories. And for a long time, it's just been about like getting the coolest photo, like making sick travel videos, whatever. But I've really started to now see um, that there's something more there. And like the power of storytelling is just like it's one of the most important things in all of humanity. I really believe that. I think story is one of my favorite quotes from John Eldridge. He said, "Story is the language of the heart." And I
Mm-hmm.
really think it is what drives connect like community and brings people together, and being able to share it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with like in a visual way, like with documentary film, with photography.
Mm-hmm.
It's really powerful for the audience, and it's also a huge tool for personal transformation for the people that you invite into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like when you invite someone to make a film, it's like you're saying, "Hey, your story matters.
Mm-hmm.
Let's find out why, and let's share that with the world."
Yeah.
Um,
And so coaching too is one of your
mhm.
passions. Yeah.
Yeah,
So let's touch on that then briefly before we
absolutely.
unpack this more.
Yeah. So coaching like specifically with parkour, yes. And but more recently, I've been trying to look a few layers deeper and see like, okay, no, like what is really the heart of why I love this. And I think it's that idea of like my heart and like what I love to do is help people close that gap between like, hey, this is who you are right now. This is who you know you can be. How do we actually do that?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is through, I think, personal identity formation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really the direction I'm moving in, is to like design a pro like a kind of like a retreat program to take people into this process of like, okay, this is what the world needs. This is what you are passionate about. Let's find those intersections and help you like craft a life where you really can just live as you are designed and created to live.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Do you weave story into that? Like, do you have people practice or change their stories around their identity when they're
yeah, so one of the first questions I ask people is like, what kind of story do you believe you're living in?
mm-hmm.
Because it's really hard to dive into like personal transformation work and like understanding your life and your story if you believe at your core that your story is a tragedy. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of story do you actually believe you're living in?
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we kind of go through this process of like working through fear, working through like what are your false beliefs about yourself? How can we uproot those and replace them with the things that are true about you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then bring you into this place of like, okay, I know what brings me to life. I know where that intersects with things that the world needs, and this is
Mm-hmm.
practically what I'm going to do about that,
Mm-hmm.
and move forward.
Yeah. Do you incorporate movement as well with this kind of mental work? Do you have a physical element to it?
Yes, or I should say I will. um, so yeah, I mean, and I think it's probably be more like adventure related, like hosting these things like in environments where we can be outside, like going on hikes and climbing mountains, and just
Mm-hmm.
doing all kinds of adventurous movement stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Potentially some parkour stuff too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that helps reinforce changing the story when you're doing something epic with your body, when you are like
Yeah,
climbing a mountain or
absolutely.
like then
Yeah.
you really feel like you're living it for real.
It gives you an external framework.
It does. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, for someone, so let's loop firefighting into this because I think for
Cool.
people who may be watching, they may be wondering, what does firefighting have to do with all of this parkour
Yeah,
and story? So
of course.
let's start with the question of what elements of parkour could potentially be useful for firefighters?
hmm So I think the answer is kind of twofold here.
Hmm.
And the first half is just like the practical like movement side of things.
Hmm.
Um, because like whether you want to like train parkour as its own thing or not, like the movements you learn and the situational awareness that it gives you
Hmm.
is significant. It will completely change the way you see the world, and you will start to see and understand like the pathways through your environment that you might have not even thought of as options before.
Hmm.
um, and just like from like a strength and agility standpoint as well, like we do a lot of like learning how to fall safely, a
Hmm.
lot of balance work, like running, climbing, jumping. It's all very functional, practical human movement when trained at like the fundamental to kind of mid level.
Hmm.
Beyond that, it starts getting like quite advanced, and it's like kind of moved from like practical to just like doing hard shit because it's fun.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, so I think that side of it is absolutely applicable.
Hmm.
Um, and then the second half of that answer is just like is the mindset, and just the way that you learn to think differently
Hmm.
while training,
Hmm.
and especially the like the ways that we contend with fear and
Hmm.
like the unknown, because there's a lot of like um, there's a lot of unknowns. Like when you're standing up high and you're like, all right, well, my goal is to try to jump over there. Like your brain's like, you're gonna fucking what?
Yeah.
Like what are you talking about?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of just like coming face to face with that fear and then like kind of deciding what you're gonna do with that.
Hmm. Do you find fear is really the thing people have to overcome when they're first learning parkour?
Hmm.
Is that the
So
primary thing that they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this? That where that doubt comes from of like, oh yeah, when people say, oh,
hmm.
parkour is not for me or I can't do that, is that kind of fear is primarily what's holding them back, or is it something else?
You know, I think initially fear actually doesn't play that much of a role,
Hmm.
because a lot of the training is very like introductory, close to the ground, doesn't have a lot of like there's not a lot of risk associated when you're first learning.
Hmm.
But as you kind of learn all your fundamentals and then you start applying them,
Hmm.
that's where it's kind of like you are voluntarily putting yourself in situations where you're like, I wonder if I can do that. And then you have to just like test yourself against that challenge and against that obstacle. And that's where the fear really starts to come in.
Hmm. And how did your relationship with fear change from when you first
Mm,
started parkour to now? Like how
yeah.
are you different from that process?
Yeah. I think I think of fear as like something that I have a relationship with
Hmm.
almost. It is this like intrinsic like part of the human psyche.
Hmm.
It's a part of who I am.
Hmm.
Um, I think when I started, I think when a lot of people start, fear is just this like it's just this feeling that they don't have any control over.
Hmm.
And I think the a lot of people's response is to just be like, all right, I'm gonna kill it. Like this is impractical. Like it's not helping me. Just get rid of it, push it down, kill it, get rid of it.
Hmm.
And I that is how I thought about it for a long time. And I know people who think about it like that.
Hmm.
But more recently, I've really come to understand that fear is it's like, okay, no, fear is this thing that's part of it's part of me, and it's there for a reason.
Hmm.
It's there for a reason. So what if instead of like trying to kill it and get rid of it, what if I try to make friends with it and just be like, okay, what do you have to tell me that I need to know?
Hmm.
Um, but also you are not allowed in the driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because a lot of the mindset is like, all right, either kill fear or like it's gonna control you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a third door here where it's like, okay, fear is real. We
Mm-hmm.
need to listen to it,
Mm-hmm.
but fear does not get to make any of our decisions for us.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to tell us what we need to know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's up to like our true self, like our true identity to actually make the choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and parkour kind of like creates a context for you to like think through that in like a kind of um yeah, it lets you think through it in like a practical like kind of like long form way where you can just give time to it. But the more you practice it, the quicker you can start to go through that process
Mm-hmm.
up to the point where it's like you can go feel the fear and just be like, nope, I got it. And then just do what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you how you actually move through it. If you just, when it comes up, you acknowledge and then you keep going, or if you had a more specific way that you, at least in your process, that you move
Mhm.
through fear when it is there. Like, how do you
Sure.
conceptualize it? Are you it's just like the friend, you're like, oh, I see you over there, but I'm still going to do this? Like, do you have some sort of little analogy that you
Hmm.
use in your mind for fear?
Yes. So let me think about how I want to answer this. Okay. I'm gonna tell like an analogy story first and then move into like the practical for like how I actually teach people through it.
Sure, sure.
So I think about like a ship,
Mm-hmm.
like an old school sailing ship, like exploring somewhere like in the polar regions in like the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're gonna start this. So on that ship, there's a lot of really important people, but the two most important people on that ship are the guy who's at the helm
Mm-hmm.
and the navigator.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll say the captain and the navigator. And they're on their way. They're on their way to this remote like place that's never humans ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And the navigator looks at the captain and says, "All right, like you need to change your bearing. We're going that way." And the way he points is like there is like the water is stormy. There's rocks. Like it looks like hell. And the navigator is saying that's the way. That's the way we got to go.
Mm-hmm.
So and then it's the captain's job to be like, okay, like let's turn, let's go, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
So who is at the helm and who is navigating in
Mm-hmm.
your life are really, really important things.
Mm-hmm.
Because if fear is at the helm, even if the navigator's right, the fear's gonna be like, no, I'm good. I'm gonna go find another way. Like that doesn't make any sense. Um, if fear is navigating, that's even scarier because it's always going to be trying to find like the safe paths. And it's going to be really hard to get where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally, we're in this place where like your true self is at the helm of the ship. You are directing this thing where it's going to go. And then you have this navigator. You can think about it. I mean, like whatever, if you believe in a higher power, for me, it's God.
Mm-hmm.
That's like he is my navigator. He's the one I'm listening to,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that looks like for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then fear's job is to be the dude in the crow's nest
Mm-hmm.
who's up at the top of the mast, looking out for danger.
Mm-hmm.
And he can say, "Hey, there's something coming. You need to pay attention to that." And I
Mm-hmm.
can be like, "Oh yeah, thanks for the heads up. I'm gonna deal with that."
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes he's gonna start freaking out and be like, "Dude, it's gonna be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're gonna figure this out."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of that's the analogy like that I really like to help frame fear.
That's a great
Um,
analogy. I love that. Did
yeah,
you come up with that yourself? Because
I did
yeah, it's
actually.
very visual. I could like see in this ship in my mind's eye. I'm sure
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
else listening.
yeah.
That's perfect.
For sure.
So how, I guess then using that analogy,
Hmm.
how do you know when you've really kind of mastered this of letting fear be in the crow's
Hmm.
nest? What are the results that you start to see in your life when you move into that kind of alignment
Hmm.
with yourself internally? Or in parkour, if that's a good analogy.
Yeah. Hmm. That's a very good question. Um,
For me, I found it's just
Mm.
my inner peace
Yeah.
increased of just
Hmm.
feeling a lot more emotionally stable of just being
Yeah.
like, and despite obstacles coming up, just continuing to sail through them. Like,
Hmm.
and it just really brought where I before, where fear was doing a lot of the navigating for me,
Hmm.
or other emotions. Yeah, it was just constant mental turmoil. That was my
Yeah.
experience. But I'm just
Yeah.
curious what you've found in your life and other people whose stories that you follow, just what they, if it gets easier or what you've noticed as far as results in their life.
Yeah. And I don't think there's a universal answer here.
Hmm.
This journey really is like unique to your story and the things that you uniquely have to contend with.
Hmm.
And I don't, at least for me so far, there hasn't been a point of arrival where I'm like, oh wow, I'm doing it.
Hmm.
It's like, no, like every day I'm having to every day I deal with this shit. And I'm like, okay, why am I why am I afraid of this? Like what, or what is scary about this? And what is like, why am I not wanting to move forward here?
Hmm.
I think where I'm at in my journey is just like increasing my awareness and starting to notice and pay attention to when this is happening and just acknowledging it and giving it space, and be like, okay, where's this coming from? Where are we going to do with this? It's like, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to do?
Hmm.
Um, but as I'm going through that, it's starting to be like the whole journey of life itself is starting to become a little bit less tense because like I have this framework to be like, okay, I know that I'm not going to like kill this thing. Like I know there's going to be fear. Like dealing with the unknown is one of the few guarantees in life. So I have acceptance of that, and it makes it so that when those things come up, I have this framework to be like, okay, this is how we're going to look at this. This is how we're going to deal with this.
Hmm.
But it really is like for me, it's a practice.
Hmm.
Um, I would not even say that I'm that good at it yet. I'm really like I'm knee deep in learning it right now.
Hmm.
So yeah.
That no, hey, I love the
Yeah,
transparency. Thank you for that.
of course.
And yeah, it is, you're right. There's an element of it that may never go away, of it always just
Hmm.
having a role, and that role could be bigger or smaller depending on, what point of life you're at, where you are in your
Yeah,
journey. So even in the same individual, it may be shifting constantly.
absolutely.
So yeah, from one day to the next, even so, yeah,
Yeah,
but we're all on this journey together, I guess. Is the
of
point
course.
is the point I'm making too.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd love to return to story and
Hmm.
loop that back in of, um, living out a really interesting story and,
Hmm.
having just followed someone and told their story through a documentary film. Um, I guess what tips do you have for us to step more into our story or own our story? Or what is the important element around story, the message you want to give to people
Yeah.
around story might be listening?
Hmm. I think one of the biggest things is that that I want people to understand is that their stories are wholly unique and needed in the world.
Hmm.
Um, and like I really believe with all my heart that like that people are uniquely created. And that there is like for every individual is like there is something that you can do for the world that no one else can.
Hmm.
And like my life mission is like understanding what that is for myself and fighting to help other people find it too.
Hmm.
So, and I think that really starts with identity and like who understanding who you are from an inside out kind of perspective, like not being informed, not letting your identity be formed by what you do,
Hmm.
but learning who you are intrinsically so that you can express that through whatever it is that you choose to do. Um,
Hmm.
so like that's really where it starts. My notes on this are behind me actually. This is good timing.
Yes.
Um,
Go ahead and grab
so
them.
yeah. I have a giant whiteboard. I'll grab it.
Oh, all right.
I've got this all written out right here.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, it really starts with identity.
Hmm.
And then from there it's with I call it sparks. So it's like, okay, this is like once you know who you are.
Hmm.
Um, and then it's like, okay, what are these things that bring you to life? Like what are the things that like when you are doing that thing, you're like, I am knee deep in who I'm meant to be. Like I feel like this is it. This is absolutely what I'm supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
Um, you look at those things, like those things for me, I like my sparks are coaching and teaching,
Hmm.
adventure, and storytelling. Like
Hmm.
those are it.
Hmm.
And then from there, the question is, okay, what does the world need? Like
Hmm.
what are the things that the world needs that are specifically like on your heart? Like what are the things you care about?
Hmm.
Um, and then we start exploring, okay, where are these intersections?
Hmm.
Where can you find like where what something that the world needs and something that you love, something that brings you to life, where does that intersect?
Hmm.
And through that process, you can kind of start understanding like what the hell to do with your life.
Hmm.
um, and some of those things can be vocational and career related,
Hmm.
and some of them might not be, and
Hmm.
that's also okay. But it's a pretty surefire way to like find a vocation and career that really is going to keep you inspired, and feeling like you're doing what you're meant to be doing.
Hmm.
And then the final piece really is looking at, okay, is there something you can do that intersects all of the sparks that you have? If we narrow it down to like three, can we find something that intersects all of that with all the needs of the world that are important to you?
Hmm.
And that's where you find your mission.
Hmm.
So just like sharing what those things are for me, like the needs of the world that are really important to me are like to experience wonder,
Hmm.
um, to have people to help people coming alive,
Hmm.
um, reminders of beauty, real
Hmm.
stories of transformation, people
Hmm.
who know who they are, and people who are courageous.
Hmm.
And that's like those are the needs of the world that are really like important to me.
Yeah.
And then the intersections for that are like teaching parkour,
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
filmmaking, making documentaries, doing photography,
Hmm.
like outdoor guiding, and like writing.
Hmm.
And then like the intersection that kind of pulls everything together for me
Hmm.
is this mission to like create this retreat program where it's like
Hmm.
let's go to the mountains, let's go on some sick adventure and just dive into this process and help people do all of this together
Hmm.
and make some cool videos and, and photos while we're at it. So
That sounds fun,
yeah.
and I'm ready. Sign me up. I'm ready to go with you on this
Sick.
retreat. That overlaps with a lot of my story. And as you were
That's awesome.
talking, it reminds me of it really sounds like you're getting all your stories in order of like your personal story and then your story of what you're
Mhm.
good at and then the well, the story you have for the world of what it
Yeah.
needs. And
Hmm.
so you're really locking all those into formation. So they're all marching together, right? And
That's the
so,
idea.
yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Thank you for your passion there. I could feel how
Absolutely. Yeah.
important these things I got some spark. I
Yeah.
got some spark.
Yeah, it's there.
So how, firefighters and stories, we have some interesting things associated with the firehouse. I mean, we love to tell stories to each other. We love to tell each
Hmm.
other about this gnarly call we went on and then what Bob,
Sure.
Lieutenant Bob did. And, we often are telling a story in the firehouse as a way to diffuse, after a big call, but also
Hmm.
connect with each other. So
Yeah.
do you have any tips for how to be a better storyteller, for
Hmm.
firefighters who do use that a lot, both at home and at work?
Yeah. Um, how to be better storytellers.
Hmm.
there's a lot to unpack with this question. um,
It's
I think
whatever
one
comes to
of
top of
the
mind first.
I
Yeah.
think so yeah, I think one of the most important things that I think about is to not like hand feed the truth of the story to whoever you're telling it to.
Okay.
Um, and that's in like in the context of like making a film or like telling a bigger story. It's like
Hmm.
show, don't tell.
Hmm.
Like the whatever it is that you are trying to convey through your story, like let your audience, whoever that is, whether it's one person, couple, like or 100 people, doesn't matter. Like
Hmm.
don't hand feed them the truth. Like let them have to engage with the story and process to understand what you're getting at.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the second piece is just be authentic, like
Hmm.
and just tell the truth. And if you're telling like a story that's like not like this big like existential like crazy thing, like you're just shooting the shit and like talking about a crazy day, it's just like
Hmm.
just be real and like be real about I think like the experience and be real about what it's about like its impact on you.
Hmm.
Um, and
Hmm.
that can start to generate a lot of important conversations as well.
Hmm. Yeah, because that will be the part that other people connect with, right? Is that
Yeah.
impact that it had on you. And then if they also identify with that
Hmm.
impact, they're more likely to lean into you.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And that's how you really can start to allow story to be something that that cultivates community and helps actually deepen your relationships with people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. It's true. It is, and it's so baked into the who we are as humans.
Yeah.
Storytelling
Oh,
around a
it's
fire. Fire and storytelling is like they go
those are two
hand in.
things that have been happening since the dawn of human existence, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was like the fun part of life was those
Hmm.
that stuff, you wait to the end of the day so you
Yeah.
can really tell people what happened to you and relate, the saber-toothed
Yeah.
tiger chasing you and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank God we're past those days. But
Exactly.
well, I mean, but there's, I think this generation has saber-tooth tigers of its own. So
Yes, and
yeah,
firefighters need reminded of that because we
yeah,
often we start to take the job for granted of like
hmm
I'm living this like really epic hero's journey. Like I'm doing shit every day that normal people don't see and we start to take it for granted.
yeah,
And then also what I find is firefighters are very reluctant to identify with the word hero, right? They don't ever want to
mm,
quantify that occupational experience as being a hero because and in abandoning that word, I feel like we're losing something.
mm,
Because you're also abandoning that epic nature of it, of like you did save
yeah,
someone's life today. Like you did go
yeah,
into a burning building. And so I'm curious. I just want to talk about that with you a little bit
mm,
more. And um,
yeah,
do you find, like, do you ever talk about the hero's journey or do you refer to that in your storytelling as a framework? Or, what are your
yeah.
thoughts on identifying as a hero versus not identifying as a hero? Does that matter? What do you think?
Mm. So I, I mean, from just like a storytelling perspective, yes, I think the hero's journey has a lot of impact and a lot of like our favorite stories are stories that reflect that kind of structure.
Hmm.
I mean, like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, like
Hmm.
like most of like the most popular like pop culture stories follow that journey in some way.
Hmm.
And I think there's something really profound in the fact that like those stories are really the ones that tend to resonate with us the most.
Hmm.
And it's it's a dangerous and sad thing, I think, to believe that those stories are beyond us.
Hmm.
Even like looking at people in history, like people who we would consider to be heroes.
Hmm.
Like we look at them and we're like, yeah, no, that person, that's it. It's
Hmm.
like at one point in time, like that person was just like us. Like
Mm-hmm.
every heroic story starts as the journey of of just a person who's just on their own trying to figure out life.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're pulled into something much bigger than them, where something is required of them.
Mm-hmm.
And when they step up and move into that with confidence, whether it's real confidence or they're just figuring it out as they go,
Mm-hmm.
like that is where the real nature of a person is revealed. And I think that's why we look at those people as heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course there's like the grand stories, but I think everybody has a little bit of that in them, and like no matter what it is you do. But like for firefighters, it's a very like profound example of like what it looks like to do that. Like, I mean, to stare into a fire and have everything in you being like, no, don't go in there, and to do it anyway,
Mm-hmm.
because there's someone in there who needs you. Like, man, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's absolutely heroic. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want that to be dumbed down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also know that there's like everyone has their own fire that they're being asked to run into in their life. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we can kind of come back to this idea of like contending with fear, because it's like fear is going to tell you don't go in there.
Mm-hmm.
And if fear makes that decision for you, if
Mm-hmm.
you allow fear to be in the driver's seat there, it's like
Mm-hmm.
you're missing out on the chance to get to step into that kind of story, to that hero's journey, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you hear that voice of fear and then make sure that courage is actually the thing that you respond with, that's where the door opens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you can really step into that. And I do just want to add the caveat there that like courage isn't always saying no to fear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes it's like being like, actually, this time, I I think you might be right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's sometimes courageous to take the step back,
Mm-hmm.
when it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And, courage doesn't necessarily have to be some external act that could be
Mhm.
considered courageous, but also the essentially decisions you're making.
Yeah.
To put down that bottle when you realize you've had enough, or,
Yeah.
when
Absolutely.
that horrible divorce hits you, to be like, it's courageous just to decide I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be
Yeah.
okay,
A hundred percent.
as
100%.
opposed to deciding like my life is over, contemplating suicide. Like those small acts
Yeah.
of internal courage,
Hmm.
um like that kind of heroism, really, I think it's really overlooked, right? Because
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
easy to throw it on to, oh yeah, you saved a cat from a tree, or a baby from a car accident. But
Yeah.
the courage that it takes, yeah, internally, especially
Mm.
in that, you're right, on your ship analogy of what's happening on that ship. Like, is it mutiny? Is
Yeah.
it like what
Yeah.
kind of stuff? And that's like no one is ever gonna see or hear or be with you in your own
Hmm.
head.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of courage and heroism that
Mm.
happens every day. Like you said, it's a practice, right? We're all kind of
Absolutely.
fighting
Yeah.
this every day with ourselves and where we want to be going. So,
Yeah. And
um, go ahead.
on that note, I think one of the most courageous acts that you can make is to actually stare your pain in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think when we live in a culture that is immensely pain averse.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's all about like nullifying suffering, like getting rid of it, like making life more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm just pulling up some notes here.
Sure.
Something I've been thinking a lot about recently is it's like this paradox that like by choosing to face pain willingly, we actually create less of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that if as we deal with fear, if we push it down and push it away, like we're going to do the same thing with our pain,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain. It's like if that's your mode, that's what we're gonna do. But that actually over time, like it's not getting rid of it. It's just like it's letting it fester.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the most courageous acts that any man or woman can do is to let it exist and to feel it and stare it in the face and contend with it in like a very forthright manner to be like, okay, like, yeah, this is gonna fucking suck.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it's like it is worth it to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It is really worth it to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, and that is the essence of resilience, like
absolutely.
to develop that skill. Um,
Hmm. My
unfortunately, go ahead.
my favorite definition of resilience I ever heard is that resilience is not resisting the change and chaos of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning to flow through it without losing track of who you are.
That's great.
Uh, it's yeah, that that quote changed my life. um,
It's true. And it's a lot less energy spent as well of flowing with or acceptance,
mhm,
whatever you want to call that process.
yeah.
Um, yes, that's great. Where did you hear that? I'm curious.
So it's in a book called Ambitious Heroes and Heartache
Oh, okay.
by Rick Alexander. That's a yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
is that is probably like the third most important book I've ever read, second to like the Bible and one
Mm-hmm.
other book.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean that whole book is about like understanding your own life in the context of the hero's journey.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, it's
Does it have,
good.
is it more like a personal
Yeah,
development book or is it more
I would
about
say so.
story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's a personal development book, but from a very like story-based perspective, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Cool. So it sounds
very
like a
good.
great read. Thank you for
Yeah,
recommending that to
for
us.
sure. Of course.
Is there anything else we haven't touched on today that you really would like to cover or
Mm,
verbalize from our conversation?
yeah. It's just a couple more thoughts on fear.
Hmm.
Because I'll start here. Another someone how a way I like to frame fear is like as a home alarm system, you know?
Hmm.
Like if you have a security system on your house and that thing goes off, it's like you're not just gonna be like I'm just gonna turn it off and go back to bed. Like that's annoying. It's like no, you're gonna see what the hell's going on. And it's like it could be the neighbor's cat, it could be
Hmm.
someone trying to like break in your house.
Hmm.
But so what's important is that like you don't just turn it off and put it away, but we look at it and decide then what needs like to what degree we need to deal with that problem, you know?
Hmm.
Like in parkour, it's like if I have a student who's looking at a challenge, and they're scared of it, the first thing I ask is, I'm like, okay, like what, like why are you scared? Like what are you afraid of?
Hmm.
Um, and really make them take a look to be like, okay, like wait, what am I actually scared of? And they're like, oh, I'm scared I'm not gonna quite make it. Like I don't know if I feel comfortable with like dealing with it if I don't make it. Like I don't know if I can bail well. I don't know if I can take that fall and be safe. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
that's really good information for you. Let's deal with that. Let's teach you how to contend with that
Hmm.
and then come back to the challenge again. So there's this
Hmm.
separation of like, okay, what are these logical fears, the things that you're like, okay, yeah, let's take an honest look at that and deal with it
Hmm.
and then come back. And then what are the things that are actually not problems, like those irrational fears. And if you can start to make the distinctions between those things, it
Hmm.
makes moving forward a lot easier. But even with all that, it's like you can like I can teach a student through that whole process
Hmm.
and have them know it's all right. Like I know physically you can do this. I know mentally you can do this,
Hmm.
but ultimately it's like as a coach there's a moment where there's nothing else I can do, and
Hmm.
that's when that person is really on the line
Hmm.
and they have to decide if they want to do that challenge or if they don't want to do that challenge.
Hmm.
And it's my job to just be like, okay, like I will support whatever decision you make here, but just do not make your decision based on your fear.
Hmm.
Just don't just if there's one thing that I could like say about fear, it's like do not let it make your decisions for you.
Hmm.
Um, because a lot of the times fear's a mile wide and an inch deep.
Hmm.
And it looks like, I mean, it looks like it's like the worst thing ever. And then you walk into it and you're like, oh, okay, it's not that bad.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's a great
Um,
analogy. And it does it before doing whatever it is that you're afraid to do, it seems so much proportionately larger than the hindsight of once you've done the thing. You're like, oh, what was I afraid of?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. And that's how it is almost every time.
mhm,
Like almost every time. It's like this thing you're super scared of. As soon as you do it, it's like, that was fine.
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
like what was I so in my head about?
Yeah.
And it's but even though that's the truth, it doesn't necessarily make it easier. Like it's still at least it hasn't yet for me. It's like it's still a process that I have to go through
Mhm,
all the time.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, just the more we stay in that process, and kind of teach ourselves how to do it well. I want to say that it's that like the easier it gets, but I don't know yet. I'm still in
mhm,
it.
mhm. That's fine. I wanted to return back to irrational versus rational
Yeah, please.
fears. How do you differentiate between those,
Mm,
either personally or when you're coaching
yeah.
someone?
I mean, it's very, very situational.
Hmm.
Um, because I can have a student who's like, they want to do this jump and they're like, okay, no, I'm scared that my foot's gonna slip. I'm gonna like hit my shin on the wall.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, yeah, like that could happen. That is a
Hmm.
realistic thing. It's happened to me. So let's deal with that.
Hmm.
And so I'll like go back and be like, okay, let's make sure you actually have the distance. Like to try the jump in like a different situation a couple times. Make sure you know how to like bounce back off the wall safely. Just like practice those like intentional learning how to fall skills before you actually try the full challenge.
Hmm.
Versus if they're going for the jump and they're like, I'm scared that my foot's gonna slip and I'm gonna fall back and land on my head and break my neck and be paralyzed and like it's like, okay, dude, hold on.
Hmm.
Like possible,
Hmm.
like like very, very, very low chance, like almost 0% possibility.
Hmm.
Um, and then just making them verbalize that and be like, okay, no, that's silly. Like there's no way that's gonna happen. Like I like that's just that doesn't make any sense.
Hmm.
And that's like kind of an extreme example, but and you can kind of like you'll start to narrow in from both sides, and there's definitely a gray area where it's like, well, I mean, I guess that could maybe happen, but is the likelihood of that thing like substantial enough that it's really something yet you need to deal with,
Hmm.
or is it just like something that you can kind of just write off?
Hmm.
And overall, I kind of think about it like when the risk of whatever you're doing outweighs the reward of doing it, the benefit of doing it, and your desire to do it,
Hmm.
it might not be worth it. Maybe fear is right in those kind of situations.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, and it is really situational. And just like to actually think about like what is the irrational fear, what is the rational fear.
Hmm.
So
Can
yeah.
you coach us through for those of us who may be afraid to try parkour but have always secretly wanted to? What
Yeah.
is your, can you help us right now? Coach us through that fear or hesitation of just trying it
Yeah,
out for
for
one,
sure.
to see if we like it.
Yeah, I mean, first thing I'd just say is like, what is your perception of parkour?
Mhm.
Um, like, is it the videos you've seen on the internet, of people like flipping between buildings and just doing like ridiculous shit?
Mhm.
Or is your perception like, because like I believe that is, I mean, that's the top 2%
Mhm.
is what most people see.
Mhm.
Um, And then I would say like so if that's your perception, okay, let's come back to the drawing board real quick because I mean I've been coaching parkour for a long time now. I teach ages 6 to 70
Mhm.
in basically like every level of physical shape you can imagine.
Mhm.
Um, and it is this I it is I think it's the most universally accessible sport like
Mhm.
ever.
Oh,
If
wow.
you can walk
Mhm.
or even like I mean there's people who have one leg who do parkour.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I have a student who's blind,
Uh-huh.
or like almost fully blind,
Mhm.
who comes and takes classes and absolutely loves it. and it's extremely adaptable,
Mhm.
extremely progressible. And it can be what you want it to be.
Mhm.
Um, and it's so fun. It parkour like helps keep my sense of wonder alive and my sense of play alive like nothing else in my life.
Mhm.
Um,
That's great
so
to hear. Oh yeah, we lose it.
yeah,
It's easy to lose that. It's easy to lose that. And I would think that
yeah,
probably you firefighters out there that are still listening,
yeah.
the there would also be that spatial awareness and problem solving that
Oh yeah,
a whole new level of that you develop that is very
yeah.
translatable to the job.
A
Um,
100%. And like the way it'll teach you to like understand pathways through your environment,
mhm,
um, and just be able to like see different ways that things can be done.
mhm,
Granted, like doing parkour in like a full fire suit is like maybe like I don't know. I've never tried.
mhm.
Let's someone put one on me. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But like even just like I think like one of the biggest benefits is just like the way it will change your view of the world, from just like an environmental standpoint, being like, okay, we need a route to get to this place. Like we need to figure this out. Like how can we do that? How can we think about this differently?
Mhm,
And also just like the general like I like no matter what you do, doing a little bit of parkour will make you better at whatever that thing is.
mhm,
Just like the increase like sense of balance and strength, is extremely beneficial for people. So
mhm. Awesome. It sounds
yeah,
fun. I'm ready. I'm ready.
sweet.
I'm excited to try more parkour. And what one tool or resource would you leave people with if they wanted to explore all of the things we talked about today a little bit further? Do you have any?
Absolutely. I'm going to make a few recommendations.
Sure.
So I already mentioned that one book, Ambitious
Hmm.
Heroes and Heartache by Rick Alexander.
Hmm.
Phenomenal read. I'd also suggest Living Fearless, by Jamie Winship.
Hmm.
That book is really kind of dives into, identity formation, and fear. Like the guy who wrote it is like he's like worked for the CIA overseas, like to like diffuse terrorist organizations and stuff. His story is insane.
Hmm.
But his process of like teaching people about like the truth of who they are and how to live in it and deal with fears really impacted
Hmm.
my life, and has helped me develop a lot of what I talked about today.
Hmm.
So yeah, living fearless and ambitious heroes and heartache, and also come take some parkour classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That yes, I fully intend to do that, and we'll link all of the resources that Zach just mentioned under the show notes today, and probably put Apex's website on there as well. Are
yeah.
there any other maybe parkour videos you would recommend for total beginners?
Not any videos off the top of my head. I think
Okay.
the best option is so we've actually just relaunched our intro program,
Hmm.
where it's just like the fundamentals class at Apex. So
Hmm.
I think that is the best starting point if people want to learn.
Okay.
So
Cool.
yeah,
Yes, we'll put all those below. And thank you again, Zach. This was a really fun
of course.
conversation.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your insight in all of those areas. And as always, a big thank you to our community for watching and being a member of Firepower X. My door is always open to you. If you have any further questions about this episode, have any feedback for us, email me at info@firepowerx.com, and we will see you in our next webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.